today I want to share a new conversation that I had with Sandra about her long COVID recovery story. Sandra reached out to me to share her story because she felt that she resonated with everything that I was sharing about the healing journey, whether that's from, long COVID, CFS, Lyme disease, anything, right? I always say this in all my videos. Don't let your mind tell you that this isn't about you. Don't actually care what anybody else's symptoms are, right? Sandra and I were talking a little bit about this before the conversation, that one of the most important things is your symptoms are always going to be completely unique to you. But our journeys can all be very similar in the roots and the approach to healing, but don't get stuck in symptoms and all these things that your mind wants to fixate on. Just forget that, really. So Sandra has a crazy story, right? It's really a wild ride, but it's got a good ending. So this is a fun one, actually. I'm quite happy to share Sandra's story, and she's got a lot of wisdom and a lot of great things to share about her journey and ways that everybody can apply things to their journey. And we just really both agree on the whole process of awakening and recovery and the deeper aspects of this as a possibility for growth and transformation, but that it doesn't take away from the fact that it can be quite hellish sometimes, that you can really feel that you're in the darkest places, and it's important, right? That's part of the journey. So it's always a balancing act, right? This is always what I'm trying to get across, is that it can get tough, it can get incredibly tough, it can get crazy, it can get wild with fear and the ways that fear can drive your mind. And that's one of the great points of Sandra's story, is the crazy things she was doing out of fear, but it all worked out in the end. It all worked out in the end, and it can for every single one of you watching this. And that's a point Sandra makes really nicely, is that for everybody, recovery is possible. So I'm very happy to share Sandra's story. Check it out. It's a really fun one, and enjoy. All the best.
So on that note, I would like to tell a little bit about my story.
Okay. Yeah.
So in March of 2022, I contracted COVID. But I think it's important for me to go back a little bit before that. In the 2 years prior to contracting COVID, I had gone through many very stressful experiences and many very traumatic experiences. I had a couple of close friends die of cancer. That was very hard. I had a friend who passed away from COVID 2 months before I contracted it. That was something I was never expecting. It was a real shock. And I was very traumatized by this.
Right.
Meanwhile, she was the same age as I was. So when I contracted it in March of 2022, I remember waking up that morning, and my husband woke up. We were both sick at the same time. And the first thing I felt was like knives were stabbing me in the head. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing in my head. Then I got up, started walking, and started coughing excessively and excessive congestion. And I felt dizzy, and I didn't know what was going on. So I knew right away, so this is important because it's that whole, how do we set off the nervous system, right? I can remember in that moment when I realized I had COVID, that I was so afraid of, that I sent terror went through my system, that I thought I was going to die.
Right.
My friend had just
died. Yeah.
So this terror went through me. I called a friend. She brought me, is it okay to say the IVER medicine?
Yeah, go for it. You can say whatever you want on, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So she brought me ivermectin and I got on that. Then I was lucky enough to have a holistic MD. I called him. He prescribed more of that. The next day, I woke up and I realized that with my doctor that I had already developed POTS. So
Right.
I had all that. I was getting very dizzy. My heart was racing. I would get short of breath. I could feel like my legs felt so strange. Like, I didn't know what POTS was, but I found out soon enough. So then I just was really scared. But I saw that, my lungs were okay. Everything was okay.
Mm.
And then about 3 weeks into it, I was still coughing up a storm. I was still all congested. I still had the postural orthostatic stuff. And I was completely wiped out.
Mm. Mm.
And before COVID, I had zero health problems. There was nothing wrong with me physically, and I was a very energetic person. I
Right.
was not an athlete, but I walked a lot. I walked briskly for at least a couple of miles a day,
Mm.
and I was sharp as a tack as far as my cognitive goes. And the next thing I knew, I got the most severe brain fog. I felt like a zombie, like I literally didn't know what end was up. I was so scared that my brain was gone. And in the meantime, my brain and my head felt like they were on fire.
Mm.
Like I believe my brain was actually swollen because I could feel this for at least 6 months into it.
Mm.
So the next thing that happened was that my sleep suddenly overnight was gone.
Right.
No, no more ability to sleep. Total insomnia. So I started taking melatonin. Luckily, it would work, but I just wasn't getting enough sleep.
Mm.
So I could get maybe 3 to 4 hours. So now I was, of course, like most of us, what is going on? And I
Mm.
was following things like, oh, you've got to detox out the spike protein. Oh,
Mm.
there are viral remnants still in the body.
Yeah.
And and of course, because this was so new, we were all trying to figure it out, right? And so I was taking all the supplements and the turmerics and the resveratrols and
Mm.
all of the natokinase and all of these things.
Mm.
And then there were people saying to me, oh, it takes time for people to get their energy back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just rest.
Now, as far as symptoms go, this is the first time I'm going to disclose these symptoms to anyone except my husband and like my two closest friends, the only people that know about this, because I want people to hear what this can do, and that nobody out there is probably going to have my symptoms. And I have not heard of one person yet having these symptoms.
Mm.
So about 8 weeks into this, my mood suddenly started to get very, very disturbed. And I was highly reactive at this point. I felt so agitated. And the next thing I knew, these waves of panic. I was alone one day, and these waves of unbelievable panic started going through my system. And
Mm.
one day, the way it was happening is I was almost about to go and jump off my balcony, but not because I wanted to jump off the balcony, because these feelings of I couldn't control what was happening
Mm.
and thought I was going to go off the balcony. So I ran up to my neighbor's, one floor up. I was so terrified, and thank God he was there. And from that moment on, I couldn't be left alone. Now imagine if you couldn't be left alone in your own house. So there was sheer terror. The waves of panic just kept happening and happening and happening. For me, this COVID thing was one thing after another, after another, after another. It just kept changing and shifting, and new symptoms and new whatever. So here I was, still in shock, still couldn't believe this even was happening. And now I can't be left alone. So my husband, meanwhile, had to be back at work. So I had no choice. I told myself, you're going to have to go to a hospital until you can figure out how to keep your butt in your house. And this right now, no matter what else was going on, no matter what all the other symptoms, the debilitating fatigue and everything I've said was still going on, but this became a huge priority. So I knew I had to handle this very carefully because I was afraid that people at a hospital, I didn't want them to think I was crazy.
Right.
So, and I knew, that I had to handle this really carefully. So I went to the emergency room. I told them I had long COVID. I told them I was having panic attacks because I knew panic attacks is okay. You can go to the hospital for panic attacks.
Right.
I didn't tell them anything about feeling I'm going to jump off a balcony.
Right.
So, because I knew what would happen.
Yeah.
So luckily I went to a really nice place with very nice people. And my only reason for going there, because I knew these people were not going to be able to help, was to go somewhere and be safe till I could figure out what to do.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm there, and luckily there's great staff, and I feel really safe there. And I was still in shock from having this long COVID. The brain fog was still unbelievable. I could barely speak to these people, and the panic I was dealing with was unbelievable. So they calmed things down with benzodiazepines, put me on a high dose. I was going to do anything at that point just to get relief. It was so scary. So while I was going through the motions there, I was thinking of who can help me figure out how to stay in my house. So I called a friend. He's sort of like the cowboy type from Texas.
Okay.
Okay, the complete opposite from a Bostonian like me, right?
Okay.
So I said, listen, this is my situation. Please figure out a way for me to stay in my house. Whatever you have to do, I don't care what it is. He said, okay, what day are you coming home? I said, well, I can leave when I want because I'm here of my own volition.
Right, yeah.
Okay, you tell me the day and I'll be there. So I figured out my day of discharge. I decided to do it on Saturday because I knew my husband could come and get me, and I'd still have Sunday that I'd be with my husband and not alone. And then by that point, his friend would fix this, right?
Okay.
So he showed up on Sunday and he had shackles. Okay. Well, okay, you guys want to know about, does anybody have your symptoms? He put one end of the shackles on the cast iron part of my bed, and then there was a chain, and then there was another shackle. Okay. And I cuffed it around my foot so I could sit on my bed, and I was cuffed in.
Oh my goodness.
Is this insane?
That's
Now
insane.
my husband is sitting there going, are you kidding me?
Can
My husband,
imagine.
but he knew what I was going through.
Yeah, yeah.
He just couldn't believe that I was going to do this. And I said, do you have any better ideas? I have to stay in the freaking house.
Yeah.
So he knew he didn't have any better ideas. So I never thought I'd be so grateful to go into shackles, right? So the next morning, okay, so here I was, even in the midst of everything else going on with these symptoms. The next morning, I got my food ready, I got my water ready, I had my porta potty where I was going to pee. I would use the bathroom in the morning, I would take a shower before my husband left. Before he left, I would just be in my room, have my computer, have my food, have my coffee, have my whatever I was going to need for the day, and then I would put the cuff around my foot. But I knew I couldn't run out of the house. I couldn't jump off any balconies because I was cuffed in.
Mm.
But I had the key. It's not like I didn't have, oh, what if there was a fire? Or
Right,
what if,
right.
I had the key,
Yeah.
right? But this allowed me to feel safe.
Right, right.
So, to give people an idea of the mind loops we create with all of this,
Mm.
I would keep myself cuffed in all day and not get off the cuff until my husband got home. Now
Mm.
that was like 8 hours or 9 hours a day.
Right.
So I finally was like, why can't you just take the cuff off and just go to the bathroom? It's
Yeah.
only 12 steps away.
Yeah.
But then I would think, well, what if I do that and then it doesn't work when I go to
Right.
close it?
Right. Yeah.
And I'd be too afraid that it might not work.
Yeah.
And I put it in my mind that, no, I can't do that. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
then I started practicing when my husband was home. I would put it
Right.
on, take it off, put it on, take it off. Look, it works. It never fails. It
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
fails.
Yeah.
And so slowly, when he would be gone, I would start, take it off, run to the bathroom, but I'd come right back and put it back on.
Right.
Before I knew it, slowly, I was off it all day, but I knew it had to be there.
Right. Right.
It had to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I had a friend call me, and I was still like a total zombie with the brain fog. I didn't understand why my energy wasn't coming back because I
Mm.
didn't know anything about the nervous system at this point, and I didn't know that I had gone into CFS
Mm.
situation.
Mm. Right.
No, I still focused on this virus. What is this COVID?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how is it doing these things to me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I had a friend call out of the blue who called to tell me she had long COVID.
Okay.
Hadn't heard from her in about, I don't know, 7 years. So we compared notes. She had completely different symptoms.
Mm.
She told me about Raylan's channel.
Right.
I got
Okay.
on the channel, and that is when I figured out exactly what had happened
Yeah.
and what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
The, yeah,
Finding Rayden's channel is such a turning point, right? Because there's just it's kind of like what you were saying with wanting to have this conversation is there's just so many demographics, there's so many stories, there's so many, cases, situation, timelines. It's like once you find that resource, You can just bombard yourself with recovery information until some part of you clicks, you know?
That's it. And so for me, once I understood what had happened,
Mm,
I knew I had to get to work.
right.
And so I had watched enough of them to know. And there was this one woman named Amy, and she was from Montana.
Okay.
And there was something about her and something about her story. And she had talked about a website she had started called positivelycovid.org.
Oh, that's so funny. Amy just emailed me yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's crazy.
So I reached out to her,
Yeah.
and this woman actually called me.
Right. Yes. Amy seems so sorry. Like I just from the even her emails, she just seems like a like such a big heart, you know?
She's incredible.
Yeah.
And I feel she was like my angel,
It's amazing.
especially at a time when I felt so desperate.
Mm,
The
mm,
desperation I felt at that point was unbelievable.
yeah.
And I said to her, Amy, I have POTS, I have this, and I went down the list. And she said, Sandra, you have nothing. And I said, what? And she said, can you read some books? I said, oh, I love books, right?
Yeah.
You know, older, so I'm still with the books. I don't like tech too much. So I don't even own a smartphone. I refuse to be under surveillance, right? So never gave in to smartphones.
Yeah.
So she told me to get a couple of books. One of them was Dr. Howard Schubiner, Unlearn Your Pain,
Okay.
fourth edition. I got the book, I read the book, and I said, I know what I have to do. This is where what you've been trying to relay, Kyle,
Yeah.
comes in. When you say, this is so simple, but so difficult,
Right.
right? So, but I was determined because I wanted to recover.
Right.
Now, Dr. Schubiner for me was a saving grace. He's a phenomenal man, beautiful soul. And yes, some people can get fully well just with his work and his book.
Right.
Absolutely, right? For me, what I found was everything I kind of needed, the universe brought to me when I needed it.
Right. Yeah, I can relate to that so clearly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I did this, but now I was ready for something else, and then it would come.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like even sorry, just to jump in there, like
Yeah,
even finding like Rayden's channel and like you said, like Amy reaching out to you, like these kind of things, they just happen when you've been beaten enough, you know, initially, the same for me, like broken down. And then at the time when you're just willing to like take in, like you said, that desperation, right? When we get to that desperation, then the universe is like, okay, now I'll send you. And it's incredible the resources that come to your aid, right? It's absolutely astounding.
it really is. And it's
Yeah.
not random.
Yeah.
Seek and you shall find.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was seeking. I was seeking, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Schubiner explained, we're gonna become indifferent to the symptoms. We're going to have no reaction to the symptoms. We're going to even change the word to sensations.
Mm.
We're going to, so I could go on, but I'll just say what I did.
Mm.
So I completely dived in and I stopped fearing these symptoms. I no longer feared them.
Mm.
I no longer reacted to them at all. I became indifferent. I welcomed them in.
Mm.
I made space for them.
Yeah.
I embraced them. I grew to love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people right now are going, is this woman crazy? How can you love these things? Well, I knew. I see it just everything clicked for me.
Mm.
I knew this is what I had to do.
Yeah. Right.
I was
I
sorry.
feel, yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, because I know that how the mind hears that, like, you love them, like that, the thing I hate the most. But I feel like it's when you go through these like absolutely insane periods of fear, right? Then eventually you just see, like, you eventually see the state that you end up in. And again, like, people that just can't comprehend how to love your symptoms and make your space, I think often you have to hit that rock bottom, right? I'm sure you can relate. It's like that, when you're shackling yourself to the bed, and then you come across the right resources. You're like, okay, I'm willing to try anything, because what's the alternative, right? So yeah, I mean, that's that where that it's like, that's why surrender I always come back to, is because it's like you have no other choice, and then eventually you can find the love for the symptoms. But often, our conditioning and everything needs to be take a real hit for a while.
You are so right on. And I totally surrendered because see, at first I was doing everything the opposite,
Yeah.
fighting this, the frustration. Dr. Schubiner in the book has his 5 F's. Okay,
Okay.
he's got the 5 F's you're not supposed to do.
Right.
And and some of them are fear the symptoms, fight the symptoms, try to figure them out, try to
Mm,
fix them.
mm,
So, I immediately that those things were gone. And I was glad he warned me in the book
mm.
that when you start doing this, expect your symptoms to get worse.
Right.
Now, I
Yeah.
happens with everybody,
Yeah.
but me, the more I mastered this and the more you see, I made a game out of it.
Yeah.
I turned it into a game. Like, no matter what you send, I'm not going to react.
Yeah. Yeah.
Send what you want. I don't care. You
Yeah.
literally have to become like, I don't care.
Right. Right. Right.
Don't
That's
care.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, because it's otherwise it's like that. There's like a hidden agenda, right, with the acceptance work. Otherwise, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this, and we don't realize the hidden fears and resistance patterns that are there. It's like you really have to come to that space where you're like, bring it on, and then sometimes, like, life will test that, like, that kind of, I don't know what's the word, that resilience or whatever. It'll be like, okay, you really want it all. And that's what you said, like, often um just for everyone, because I get this question a lot, right, about like, why are my symptoms getting worse when I'm practicing these techniques? And it's like, yeah, you're kind of going really into the fire of it, right? And yeah, you just got to be open to everything. So I love that approach.
Yes. And so I was glad that I was a bit prepared because
Mm,
when they would get so much worse, I would say, great, more opportunity to
mm.
practice.
Yeah, yeah.
And while I would say to my husband, if the average person ever had what's going on in my body right now,
Mm,
they would be running to the emergency room every hour on the hour.
mm, mm.
This is how crazy and insane these sensations were.
Yeah, right.
But I just stuck to it.
Yeah.
I I was like, I don't know, I remember saying my type A driven personality got me here, but
Mm.
then I felt like my type A is going to get me out of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like you can like really, that's what I love with if I think more about like awakening and inquiry and stuff, it's like use your suffering as fuel. You know, you instead of like going to this like, oh, I need to be calm approach, because that's the place we often get into, right? It's like I need to calm my nervous system. I need to, you know, where it's like if there's struggle there, you can really, you know, use that fire. And like you said, like these type A personalities, when like just something that always comes up for me when I listen to people that recovered is that perspective of how, what can I just use everything that comes up to, you know, take me in the right direction. So every time your symptoms come on, saying to yourself, this is good, you know, that kind of foundation, that's what, you know, once you lay those foundations, you're going to find your way out. Like in the end, it really doesn't matter. And then the same perspective of like, you know, when we're still stuck, and what's happened is so much fear has been like processed by this point, because otherwise we're afraid of our type A personality. We're like, oh no, my type A personality is, and then that fear mode, like, oh no, 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 I need to get rid of it. I need to get rid of my type A personality. With that
Right.
perspective of like, no, I can use this, right? When we start to look at things like that, I can use whatever comes up, everything I have, like it's just a game changer, right? But it's, you know, I can understand the other perspective as well, and it just takes, like the process has to play out almost. It's like you can't force it. I don't know, you know. Yeah.
So, you know, before, so I started going out and walking because I can remember all I had to do was read the first 4 chapters of Dr. Schubiner's book. And I went, I get it. I get it. And I
Yeah.
went outside and I walked for 15 minutes briskly.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I was not able to take 20 steps or 30 before I had to come right back in and lie down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just reading the first 4 chapters and having this click and saying, I get this. But that didn't mean that the reserves were all suddenly back and I was now able to go walk a mile. No,
Right.
I
Yeah.
wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah, I can totally, sorry, I can totally relate to that though. Like, it's interesting. I don't often talk. Like, it's just it's cool talking with people because it brings up stuff from my own past, and that's that same thing where it all clicks, right? And I would do the same. I was just like, great, I'm gonna go out and do and like push myself a little bit, but it doesn't always just come flooding back. But it's like something big has dropped out of the way, you know, like something has massive has clicked into place, but you know there can still be a lot of work to do after that. Like it was exactly the same for me. It was like, okay, going and doing something, and then like walking, and then yeah, and then that kind of I'll let you carry on now, but like that feeling of, oh no, I thought I had it all, but there's still stuff to do. Yeah.
oh, there was a lot of work to still do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, and this is where it also becomes individual,
Mm.
because you, as you're going through all this, you're also learning every day about triggers,
Mm.
about new things, about what do I still need to let go of here that's no longer serving me,
Right, that's a big one. Yeah.
ways of operating that, wait a minute, you know, because I would feel better, have a good day, then I go about things in a certain way, and then I would crash, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
and you need to learn all of that. Yeah.
Right? Of course. And so getting back to the universe sends you, you know, what you need when you're ready for it. So I got to about, I would say, 50% recovery with Dr. Schubiner's book And by the way, there are guided meditations that go along in his book where he gives you a password, you go on his website. They were very helpful, especially when the sensations would be going cuckoo, and I would do one of them that's somatic tracking.
Yeah.
That really is all about just feeling everything,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
it be there. And, I can hear his words now, without fear, without worry, without concern. So I'm doing all these guided meditations, and he had quite a few. So very helpful. And then I reconnected when I realized that I had gone into actually CFS, and I don't even like labels because they're not important.
Yeah.
Like, because, oh my God, chronic fatigue syndrome, that's a very serious disease. There's no, there's no that, right?
It's really just an umbrella term, kind of,
Right, right. And even this long COVID, like, I think the only reason that they call this long COVID is because COVID was new, as opposed to our stress bucket was full.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we had been doing up to that point was not serving us,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And then the COVID tipped over the bucket, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. COVID, but that's the one that we like, oh, it's COVID, right? It's like this thing that's just it's so funny. The coach that I worked with for a long time used to use that exact same analogy of like it's like a bathtub, right? And then like this one little, it's like all these animals in the bathtub, and then this one little animal jumps in, and the bathtub was already full, but now everybody blames this little animal for being the absolute ruin of everything. And I always love that analogy because it's exactly the same. It's like, yeah, COVID, I think just going on a little aside here, because it came up earlier when you were talking about the fear that struck you when like your friend died from COVID. There's something about COVID, and I think on a global level, like the way, we were all looking at COVID, that there was just so much. The word that just comes to mind for me around COVID is fear, right? And if you look at long COVID and all of this, there was just so much. I think like maybe even in the virus itself. I mean, who even knows that level? But on a global scale, it was the same for me. I've gone back and looked at it, and it was like all of the reasons that this thing built up into such a big thing around COVID was all of the subconscious fears that I had built up, specifically early on, when I think we both got it in 20. Well, I think you got it a little bit later than me, but anyway, like just this fear of what this virus can do to people, and then you get it, and it's just fear in the system, So that's something that's just like there's so much. It has such a bigger impact on a person's physical level than most people realize. Like this global societal fear that we had around COVID. It's crazy how that kind of runs into your nervous system when you get the virus. That's just something, I wanted to point out. Yeah.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
In fact, I agree to the point that in hindsight, I was looking at this and saying, if I hadn't known about this, and if my friend hadn't died from this, and I knew about all this, I would have just got this and just been like, what the heck is this? And I would have been coughing, and I would have been, because 4 months before, I had the flu.
Yeah.
But I know how the flu behaves. I've had it so many times in my life, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't it happen when I got the flu?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was fine. 5 days, back to normal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you are so right about that, because I know that when that fear went through my system, and my, and the stress bucket being filled with the fear and all the trauma and my friend, and and so I know exactly why this happened to me. And you don't have to know exactly why. I think what's important is to know that you don't want to recover and go back and do what you were doing before.
Yeah, that's so important.
because what you were doing before was not serving you and is what got you here in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah, it's like it's the whole point of this journey. Like there's I know that like often this kind of talk doesn't resonate with everybody, but it's the way I see it now. And it's like it's the whole point of the journey, right? The whole point of the journey is not to go back to exactly the way things were. Yeah.
Right. Well, unless you want to really punish yourself, but
Yeah, yeah, you know, if you do, then maybe you still need to learn some lessons or something. Who knows?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So moving on a bit,
Yeah.
I got to a certain point and it was good, and I was just going to keep going. But then I knew a man from the past whose name is Kyle, also Kyle Davies in Wales,
Okay.
and he's been involved in this field for years. But and he's a coach. He's written a book called The Intelligent Body, which is a phenomenal book. To me, it's like a blueprint for how to live your life and have well-being, right? And
Right.
there's almost like not a single thing you could think of to even ask that is not covered in this book. So I knew of him from years ago when I had gone through chronic Lyme and I had had a transverse myelitis attack where this inflammation of the spinal cord happened. And I won't get into that because I healed from all of that.
Yeah.
And there are people who will tell you you can heal from that. So yes, I did.
Yeah.
And when I was 48 years old or 49, whatever. Um, but at that time, he helped me quite a bit. And I remembered that he specialized in chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, all these chronic pain, the same stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I thought, hey, wait a second. If this is what I've gone into, and I know Kyle from the past, and I know how much more even spiritual his work is, which I love.
Mm.
Let me ring him up. So I did that, and I found out that since I had last had contact with him, he now had an online program.
Right. Okay.
So I decided I was going with that. And those were my final pieces because, Dr. Schubiner stuff was great and he got me quality of life back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I did the work. I did the work, but I don't think I could have done it without his help,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's very relatable for me and like DNRS brain retraining. It's like as you were telling this whole story, it was such a parallel where it was like, it's like that gets you to 50%. It gets you that feeling of you can do things, but there's still the other 50%, right? But yeah, as you say, it is so helpful because the way that somebody packages it, and again, it's like I think we find the resources that we need that's going to resonate with our kind of particular conditioning and personality and nervous system and all of that. But it was the same for me. I can see the exact, it's just the replica in your story and my story of that kind of those resources that get us so far and they serve us, and then and now I'm keen to hear the rest.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up DNRS because I totally bypassed it because the friend I was talking about who called me and had long COVID told me she was doing that.
Right.
And I tried it, and this is not what I needed. This did not resonate.
That's the thing.
Okay, not what I wasn't going to work for me. Yeah, again, so it is very interesting because somebody could do that and think, I can't get better. All these people get better, but I can't because I did this for 6 months and I can't get better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, no, that's not true.
It's just to like expand on this, it's such an important point because I get these kind of questions a lot on YouTube about like, what do you think of this course? What do you think of that course? Should I do it? Like, and these kinds of things, it's so particular to what is going to click in place for you at the time. So there's something that I could say like, oh yeah, that's a load of nonsense. And for somebody else, it could be the best thing they've ever come across. So I don't ever want to say anything is a load of nonsense because it's so particular to like each individual. And it's such a key point that you make that if you're hearing like these courses that work for everybody else and they don't work for you, what you really want to look at is that kind of mechanism that's looking for a reason that you're never going to recover, because that's what it comes down to then, is that kind of belief in the system that's looking like, oh, okay, I can't recover, right? It's like that's what you want to look at. It's going back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like no matter what comes up, I'm going to find my way. I'm going to use everything. So yeah, but and that does mean maybe trying until you find the one that works for you.
Right. Absolutely. And so he was my final piece. And it was the simplest things, really, that just filled in the rest of the gaps.
Right.
I mean, an example would be the simplest thing was you don't have to do things get things done in a particular way at a particular time. And I was like, wow, I've always been, I must get this done by this time, at this time, and this way, right? Now, that for me was huge. And then he has this whole thing about teaching you how to flow.
Okay.
So this was about take the pressure off and the tension. We don't need that. We, these ways that I was, operating and had to be done this way. And oh my gosh, and what if I got to get all this done? And it was like, no, I don't.
Right.
Then I learned how to listen, because before, like, I was even like saying, I should go out and try to walk and see if I can walk for 10 minutes. No, because I didn't even feel like walking at that time. But I didn't realize that my body was like, I don't want to go for a walk right now. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
So I started learning about this flowing. And so then once I got on with Kyle, I never crashed again.
Amazing.
I did not have to pace. Pacing was not needed. Once I learned about this flowing, and then it's hard to explain, like we say, like it's hard to put these things in words.
Right. Yeah.
But I started to just do what I wanted, when I wanted, as I wanted. That was the key. Not what I felt I should, must, or have to do, or try to prove, or
yeah. That's like you said, like it can be difficult to explain, but I think another way we can put this into words is seriousness, right? That like serious contracted feeling of things have to go a certain way. I should, the guy that's been very helpful for me was Angelo, and he often says, just erase the word should from your vocabulary, because there's no way that things should be. There's nothing you should have done or you shouldn't have done, right? It's those beliefs are like the poison, right? Because that's like, oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And it's coming from a space of non-seriousness, of joy. Even there was another guy that was helpful for me, was saying like, do something you enjoy, right? And it can take some practice. So that's the thing. Like because the key is also getting out of the head or getting out of the mind, because like I loved the way you put it with the body. The mind will always kind of almost go like want to go in opposition to the body. Like, oh, I should be doing this. But the body is like, no, I don't actually want to do that. And it's like, we have to take some time to unwind those. It's a lot of momentum and like habit to these beliefs of like, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. But it's so key because it's like you don't need to be doing anything. There's no way that things should be. It's just come back into this flow thing. I love it because that's what it is. Just come back into a flow of what your body and energy wants to do, but it can take some work to figure that out, or find it,
Yeah. And all about connecting back to your authentic self.
Yeah.
That's an important piece.
So key, yeah.
Yeah, your true self and being in the flow. And yes, very important to keep that vibration high.
Mm-hmm.
This is important. That doesn't mean don't feel your feelings. Oh yeah, you need to feel them.
Yeah.
Don't suppress them. Don't block them. Feel those emotions. They are the symptoms are messengers. The emotions are often messengers. The emotions sometimes are there to have you take an action. They want you to, they come up because in that moment, they want you to take an action. It could be something you want to change. You might have to set a boundary. You might need to have a conversation. It could even be turn off the television or change your location or change the channel on the television or, or it's telling you, wants you to eat something.
Yeah.
It'd be so simple.
Yeah. That's so key though, because like I love the way you said that the emotions are wanting you to take action or do something. Like, yeah, you got to feel it as well to first even get in touch with the emotions, right? Because we're so used to living in repression and like numbing ourselves away from emotions out of conditioning and whatever the root causes are. But when you realize that, yeah, it all has its purpose, right? Anger has its purpose to set a boundary. Fear has its purpose to remove yourself from that situation. But there's times I'm just thinking like fear, like when you're shackling yourself to the bed and stuff. There's times when there's just an overwhelm of these emotions, but that is so key. Coming to that space where because you're coming out of that resistance, right? You're no longer believing that this is something in opposition to my well-being. It's like, no, this is here to serve me, right? This is here to, it's got its role, right? And we need to, again, come back into flow with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's funny we're using these words because, it's called energy flow coaching. And the book, I feel like I've been recommending this book to everybody I know for like the last 10 years at least, long before COVID came along, but it's called The Intelligent Body.
Right.
And it really is phenomenal. So yeah, like I feel like I'm at this point where my nervous system is like, it's on the verge of giving up. Like, hey, we can't get to her anymore. No matter what does this make sense? Like, because like, it's really the unconscious.
In like a bad way or good way?
No, like I'm saying like I've mastered it to the point where the nervous system can be very stubborn and still wants to protect you. And so the more you master all of this, the more it just tries to hang on with almost like it's going to go out with a big bang. Like, like here I am. I feel like I'm 80% recovered. I can pretty much do whatever I want, whenever I want. But it still likes to send me these sensations.
Right.
From time to time.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's because it doesn't want to give up yet, like until it's still like trying to see if I'll react.
Right. Yeah. It's always, it does make sense completely. And just the one way this could just be like a different way of thinking, but Yeah, I can totally see it. It's like it's still just a, a challenge to react. But what, just let me know how this sounds. But what I like to think of is that there isn't even like a nervous system that's like against us, if that makes, like, I'm sure that, but just the way that could sound, it's like, yeah, the nervous system is still kind of trying to test me. And it's like I often feel like that's still got the flavor of like something that is not me, if that makes sense. It's like,
Yes, it does.
yeah,
Because it's really the unconscious mind.
right,
That's what it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good way to put it. It's like going unconscious, right? It's like we can, and that temptation is still there, but if it is still there, it's it's serving its purpose, right? There's still letting go that needs to happen at a deeper level, maybe. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So, again, just like I hear you say, that's why I wanted to come on
yeah,
and say, it is the most simple thing to do this, and yet at the same time, the most difficult thing you're ever going to do.
yeah, exactly. It's so, I mean, just listening to your story from start to finish, it's like you said, you will go go through, find yourself in places you can't even imagine, right? Like the weird and wackiness of it. But in the end, it's so simple. It's almost too simple. That's why we have to go on these kind of like crazy loops to see that it's none of this craziness, if that makes sense, right? It's like the mind will choose complexity over simplicity every time, because that's how the mind works, right? It wants a big problem to solve. And then when it's confronted with the fact of how simple it is, it's there's no space to avoid anymore. That's the key, right? When it's so simple, that's why we don't want to acknowledge the simplicity of it, is because now I have no choice but to feel into those sensations that my mind try to pull every sock out of the drawer to make me not do that. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, absolutely. I had so much of that, and I would just say, I see what you're trying to do, but it's
Mm,
not going to work with me.
mm,
No, it's not. And so I guess, like, I keep telling my friend who has such a difficult time sticking to this, because she'll have 2 or 3 good days. And then if the fourth one, okay, is not,
mm.
she reacts terribly.
Right.
She can't control herself. And I'm not judging her, I'm just sharing.
Yeah.
Um, so she goes to all the no-nos, the frustration, the anger, the I can't do this anymore. All of the things that we're
Mm,
not, we don't want to be doing. And she keeps setting herself backwards. And I say to her, listen,
mm.
you're so stubborn. Why don't you use that stubbornness here? Like,
Yeah.
when they come,
Mm.
that's when you really want to put your stubbornness to work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I even try to put it to her that way,
Yeah.
you know, but I don't, and I don't even know if this is the right wording, but like I understand how difficult it is for people to not resist these symptoms. Like,
Mm,
oh my God, but when you don't resist them, when you let
mm,
them be, when you allow them,
mm.
when you just let them be, you would not believe what happens.
Yeah.
That's when the healing begins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's like it's so good that you say that, because it sounds so scary to the mind at first, or to whoever, to think that, accept why I don't want to do that, right? So it's so helpful to, not as something to like imagine in the future that's going to take you away from your symptoms, but to realize that the work is worth it. It's fruitful, right? It is. But at the same time, to just come back to what you're saying about your friend, like for me, having worked with so many people on this now, and it's just like it's so paradoxical in a sense because it just has to play out the way it does in one sense, like all the emotional breakdowns, all the explosions, like it just has to come to that point where each person sees it for themselves. And at the same time, it's not like sharing with, talking. This is why I talk about this, and this is why we're having these conversations. It is important and it is helpful, but at the same time, it's like we only get to that space where the healing happens once we've exhausted ourselves, I guess. We've exhausted entirely all those options. So it's always funny for me talking about this because it's like you got to have a healthy respect for paradox, because it's like, we can talk about these actions that can be taken, and then at the same time it's going to play out when it does, in each person's journey, how it does, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I totally respect that. And I just hope that everybody will heal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because you don't have to
Yeah.
be like this the rest of your life. This is not necessary.
Exactly.
Is it okay to say it like that?
That's such a great way to say it. I love that, because that's what's key, right? It's like, okay, for some people they're just not ready to do that kind of work. But
Right.
what the way you put it like that is, it's an invitation, right? It's like it's not necessary. So if there's that spark in you that's like, I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this, and it's searching for this and it's searching for that, just keep trusting that. And that's the beautiful thing is, right, intuition will lead you exactly where you need to go. um, because all the resources that we find along the way, like we said, the universe provides when you're ready for it. So it's beautiful, and that comes back to the point of like complexity as well, is that it can be a crazy journey, it can be a wild journey, but it's not like complex in that you need to go and, like, I don't know, solve some incredible formula to find the right thing. It's like, if you realize that it's not necessary for me to live like this, and I'm willing, for me, it always comes down to willingness, right? I'm willing to go deep. I'm willing to feel, then you'll find your way. And that's why we talk about it as well, because you want to share that kind of resonance as well. It's like, listen, you can do this too, and then hopefully something clicks inside of the people listening to this as well. It's like it's available for you, you know.
Exactly. Yes, Kyle. Yes. And yeah, a wild journey. Oh my God. I mean, I think when I was telling my story, now this all seems like a dream.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just want to say that for people who are still suffering, the suffering, I believe, my experience, once I started to understand and change things, the thinking, the judging, the putting labels on things, that's what creates the suffering.
Yeah,
Because in the now moment, we are all okay.
exactly.
If you are in bed, you are okay.
Yeah.
You can smile,
Yeah.
you can try, you can, you know, I mean, it took me a while to realize I can have all these symptoms, but still feel joy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I did it. And so now I was a joyous person with all these symptoms.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
better than suffering,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's such a crucial point that you make there, though, because that's what I try to convey so much on my channel, and that's why I talk about awakening, right? Because it's like, okay, cool, let's talk about health, let's talk about this, But it's like when you can wake up, like you said, to the fact that the whole story, the whole timeline is a dream. All the suffering is in the timeline, right? All the suffering is in the narrative. If you just come back into this moment as it is, it's always okay. But
Right.
we're addicted to that timeline, and it's okay as well. Like, because this can sound judgmental to the mind that, like just stop thinking, right? It doesn't work like that. Obviously, we have to go on this crazy journey. It's why I love people that talk about this awakening process and all of that as a hero's journey, because that's exactly what it is. It's like you go out there and you do the crazy things that you have to do on your journey, and then you come back into the moment to realize that there was never anything wrong, right? There was never a problem, but you have to go on the journey, right? You have to go on the crazy journey. You have to do everything that's going to scare you, and it continues. But yeah, I mean, that's so key to realize that the suffering isn't necessary. The suffering isn't here. How's one way to put it? Like the mind thinks the suffering is just the next step of the symptoms, right? Or like the sensations, right? It's like, oh, and now I must be suffering. And then we put on this identity as well. Like,
Yeah.
like you said about the joy thing. It's like you can see how the mind or the unconscious just completely gets a hold of us, uh, believing that we're not allowed to feel happy because, and we're not allowed to feel spontaneous and all of that because of the story. And I can see this when I'm working with people. Again, not from judgment. I've been there. We've all been there. You have to go through it. But you can see how that kind of identity has gotten such a hold of somebody that they like it's this belief that I can't feel joy. I can't be happy. That's what comes across so clearly for me often is like, it's just like being sucked out, but it's not necessary. Right. So it's, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think, in closing,
Mm.
I would like to say to people, trust and allow.
Yeah.
The advice I would give is turn everything over to your higher self so
Mm.
you don't even have to carry it.
Mm.
Trust your higher self to guide you.
Yeah.
In my case, I asked my ancestors to help me out.
Mm.
I like to turn to them. Now, there might be some people that don't even believe in that, which
Mm.
is fine.
Yeah.
I'm, whatever you believe is okay, and whatever you feel is okay. And, but I asked them for help, and I asked my higher self for help, and everything I needed just came to me. But because I went through so much unnecessary suffering,
Mm.
which now I realize was necessary, but you know,
Right.
but you know what I
I'm
mean?
with you. I'm with you.
It's almost like a mother who, like I'm a mother, and it's almost like you want to take your, um, your child that's whatever age and say, I want to give you all my wisdom right now and put it all inside you so you don't have to go through any of this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you can't do that,
You can, no, absolutely not.
right?
Because also, just to link that back to what you said very well at the start of it, is like everybody's journey is going to be different, right? So like our mind might come up with like, this is what you need to know, and sure, there's elements that is always going to be helpful, but it's like everybody needs to go on that path themselves, to because it's like you said with the symptoms, and it's the same, I guess, with the challenges for people, is it's going to be unique to you, so we can be there, but it's such a personal journey.
It really is. And so, yeah, I think if you ask, you shall receive.
Yeah.
Ask for what you need and just watch it unfold.
Yeah.
But trust and allow.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. There we go. Let's leave it at that, because for me, those two words are probably the things that I also like to point people to the most. Is I like, yeah, what you said about trust, because it doesn't matter for each person. We can put that object of trust as something else, right? For, like you said, for someone it might be like, for you, your ancestors. For somebody it might be their higher self. For somebody it might be the universe. For somebody it might be life. For somebody it might be nature. For somebody it might be God. For somebody it might, whatever. But it's the same thing. It's trusting in that higher power, right? This thing that's beyond the small mind. That's like, there is, again, like, don't, for anybody watching this, don't let one particular label put you off. Find what it is for you. I mean, you could be religious, you could be a scientist, and for you, one person it could be nature, and for one person it could be God. It's the same thing, right? It's this kind of this divine thing that's functioning everything, this intelligence. And if you can learn to come into trust, if you can learn to trust, and that requires letting go and surrender, because that's what it is. It's like a willingness to let go from the me, from my story, and into that. And like you said, things will pop up where they need to.
They will unfold.
Exactly. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, Kyle, it's been really nice talking with you.
Yeah.
I hope that this conversation helps people. I
Yeah.
really.
No, I mean, I'm so glad that you reached out to share your story, because it's like you said, it's just such a different story. It's such a different perspective, but like, you can also see how it's exactly the same. But that's the beautiful thing about talking about these things, like Raylan's channel and all of that, is hearing from everybody's different stories, that it's possible for you. And I love your story because it's so crazy, right? It's so wild.
Like, okay, why don't you guys try to top that one?
Yeah, exactly. Like, someone, because that's what so many people do online, is they're like, oh yeah, you must have just had like a very mild version if you recovered. So I mean, you're
Yeah, right.
good luck.
Oh yeah. How about I was disabled from work. I could
Yeah,
no longer work. I could no longer I mean, I could take care of the most basic needs of my day,
yeah,
shower, putting on my clothes, and on good days, making myself some food. And I'm a gourmet cook, and I
yeah,
had some Greek, and that's all I've done my whole life is cook and feed people. And I had to resort to like scrambled eggs because I didn't have the stamina or capacity to cook anything beyond scrambled eggs,
yeah, yeah,
you know? So yeah,
yeah.
guys, it was pretty, it was rough. It was rough, but I don't regret it because I'm better now.
Right,
I mean
right.
better than before.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying life now. I'm not operating on any, you know, automatic whatever. Uh,
yeah,
I'm just flowing.
yeah, exactly. It's a completely different way to live than what we were used to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So keep up
amazing.
the good work, Kyle.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I will. Yeah, thank you so much for being willing to share your story as well.
My pleasure. Take good care.
All right, all the best, Sandra.
Bye bye. Bye.
Cheers.